International Men's Month, which is probably why Matt Power and I are going to be on your screen. Wait, I'm being told that it's not that at all. Instead, Matt is here to discuss the 2024 Sustainable Products of the Year from Green Builder Media. Now, he's also going to add some context to these products as it pertains to environmental events across the globe. So look forward to that. Now, who is Matt Power? Matt Power is the editor-in-chief of Green Builder Media. It's largely because of Matt that Green Builder Media was named Best Residential Trade Magazine by the National Association of Real Estate Editors for 8 consecutive years. Matt has an award-winning, nearly 3-decade career reporting on innovation and sustainability in housing. Now, he has a long history of asking tough questions and adding depth and context as he unfolds complex issues. Now, before we get started, I want to introduce today's webinar sponsors. Whirlpool Corporation is committed to being the best global kitchen and laundry company in constant pursuit of improving life at home. In an increasingly digital world, the company is driving purposeful innovation to meet the evolving needs of consumers through its iconic brand portfolio, including Whirlpool, KitchenAid, Maytag, Console, Brastemp, Amana, Baunecht, JennAir, Indesit, and InSinkErator. Uponor North America is the partner plumbing and HVAC professionals rely on for smart water and energy solutions. An award-winning manufacturer of PEX piping and the exclusive marketer and distributor of Uponor PP-RCT in North America, the company offers plumbing, fire safety, radiant heating and cooling, hydronic piping, and pre-insulated piping system solutions for new construction, retrofits, and remodels in the residential and commercial markets. And our friend PowerShift by NV Energy is a program that helps residential and business customers conserve energy and save money on their power bills. PowerShift is a one-stop resource to find energy-efficient products and services. For more information, please visit them at nvenergy.com/powershift. Now, you are welcome to submit questions for Matt. Simply use the questions box that you'll find probably on the right side of your screen. I'm going to review those questions and pose those to Matt during the Q&A time set aside after his presentation. And now, to present the 2024 Green Builder Media Sustainable Products of the Year, Matt Power.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of this summer day to sit and stare at a screen with me. I hope you're somewhere cool in this extreme heat event that's going on. I'm up in the state of Maine, and I'm just above the heat dome, so it's a pleasant 75 degrees or so here, but we're one of the few places in the country. So each year we do these sustainable products of the year. These are editors' picks where we choose about 50 products, usually with a few honorable mentions. And we're often asked what our criteria are. So I wanted to give you just a quick, I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to touch on these. We tell manufacturers and marketing people, this is what we're looking for when we look at sustainable products. Each one of these, sometimes one will be much more heavily weighted than another. For example, a device like a heat pump that has, very large energy savings, that might be the thing that pushes it over the edge. But for other things like, fiber cement siding or, certain types of decking, durability may be, the winning part of their sustainability package. And each one of these, of course, has subcategories as you drill into it. I just wanted to take one example of a product, and this isn't one of our award winners, it's just a product category. If we were to look at transportation, asphalt, we're all familiar with asphalt roads, right? Well, when you're considering the sustainability of asphalt, it might seem like, well, it's all the same. Well, it turns out that everything matters in terms of how asphalt's produced, how it's laid down. So this chart shows how the distance and the type of truck has an impact on the greenhouse gas emissions of asphalt roads. Now, also, how the road is designed, how thick is the asphalt? Is it designed, sometimes the lighter roads that are designed to be repaired more easily can actually be lower in greenhouse gas emissions. That's what they call the perpetual alternative, and there's a bunch of specs that go along with it. I just wanted to sort of get you thinking about all the different things that go into a product's sustainability before we dive into our own. I also wanted to make one point, and I happened to watch a George Carlin segment, the late George Carlin comedian the other day, where he said, look, we're not saving the planet. The planet doesn't need to be saved. And he kind of made a good point in this little bit. He says, you know, it's people that we're trying to save. And really, I actually even have to remind my own writers and editors about this, because they'll sometimes use phrases like that. The planet will correct itself, and it may correct itself without us on it. But what we're trying to do is find a balance, right? And find a balance with the natural ecosystems of the planet to tread more lightly upon the planet and bring things to a point where they are in equilibrium and sustainable. But we are not on a mission to save the planet. And also, with all of these products, or most of them anyways, behavior makes a huge impact. So, for example, you may have seen this Ford F-150 Lightning. I love this thing, and I'm sure if you're a truck enthusiast, you've drooled over it like I have. It's just something cool about combining EV technology with a pickup truck. It's got about, I think, a 360 or 400 mile range now. But this product, like all EVs, there's sort of a caveat that goes along with them. A woman at Harvard did, I believe it was a PhD dissertation on research comparing electric vehicles and combustion vehicles. And what she found was, because of the high greenhouse gas emissions of producing the batteries for EVs, that you only begin to collect that greenhouse gas dividend at about 55,000 miles, meaning you've got to drive that EV 55,000 miles before it starts to beat the gas in terms of CO2 emissions. Now, that range is wider depending on the specific EVs. I think it starts at about 26,000, goes up to about 69,000. There's sort of a subtext to this, though, which in the article she points out, what's happening is the wrong people are getting these EVs now. They're the people who can afford the higher ticket price, right? And who don't drive much and are already typically green motivated. So what's happening is they're selling these vehicles before they reach that 55,000 mile mark and losing the benefit. So they go out and they buy another one. So there needs to be a shift, not only in sort of the market, but like we need lower priced EV vehicles for the people that are commuting, you know, 45 minutes each way every day. And we need the EV manufacturers to think more about who the mass audience for this is from a sustainability viewpoint. So I just give that as an example of how behavior can often shift the balance in a sustainable product. If the behavior is not there, then the sustainable gains in terms of reduced greenhouse gas emissions may not be there. One thing we do each year too is I like to distinguish between innovations and upgrades. So an innovation is something that's on the bleeding edge. It's a new way sort of to solve a problem. An upgrade, and upgrades are still great, but that's basically building a better mousetrap. So you build a, you know, if you have a 16-SEER heat pump and you increase the efficiency to 22, then that's an upgrade, right? Here's an innovation I actually wrote about this year, which was a DC powered pool pump. I don't know if you've seen these, but this pump runs directly from solar panels. So obviously it only runs during the day, but I installed one and tested it out. The thing has got extreme power. It's more powerful than the AC powered one that I had, the single speed. So that's innovative because it basically didn't exist. It's a zero carbon emission device. So that's kind of game changing. Now in my article, I did say there's a couple tweaks that it needs to be ready for prime time, but pretty happy with where the direction of that innovation. I think it definitely deserved a call out. Now the other version, now this product is one of our products of the year. It's a variable speed pool pump. So to put this in context, there's several million, I believe, swimming pools around the country. So these pumps use about 650 watts, not this particular one, but a typical pool filter pump uses about 650 watts, and that's running often 24 hours a day. So think about the eco footprint of that and the greenhouse gas emissions. So even just by switching to this variable speed technology, you can cut that by 90%. So, what are you getting down to, in the 100 and something, 100 watt range, right? Again, that's an upgrade, but a really nice upgrade. Another thing we like to do when we're selecting these products is we start from the perspective of, where's the need the greatest, because where is the energy going? Now, it's pretty easy to pull up one of these pie charts about the home energy use, and you can see right away there's the heating, cooling, dropping down to the other water heating appliances and lighting stuff. So why not start with products that are addressing these needs? But there is one category that starts even before that, the ground level, and that is concrete. So one of our winners this year was this Forterra React green cement. So cement is a huge greenhouse gas producer. This chemistry, this technology, this recarb, supposedly can drop the CO2 emissions from cement by about 70%. So that would make a huge impact in the construction industry. And you'll often hear, oh, cement's the problem, cement's the problem. But I did also want to even put cement in perspective. So this is the breakdown of the CO2 emissions from a typical modern new home. You see concrete is the light blue area there on the right. One thing that surprised me a little bit is the steel rebars, the orange down the bottom. So it's not like there are so many steel rebars. It's just that the steel does have a high embodied energy because it's costly to produce. Depends a lot on whether it's recycled content, but most steel nowadays is recycled, and it is essentially a forever product. But you'll notice even up the top, like paint, I'm glad they included paint. There's some things that you might not think about that are fairly high in CO2 emissions. There's also somewhat of a sort of a dispute about material embodied energy versus operational CO2. And you'll see, I actually was looking this morning at some of the different organizations, and some builder organizations I noticed say that it happens for some reason. They have everything weighted towards the material side. Others weight it more towards the operational, meaning how people live in it, what do they spend on heating, cooling, painting, maintenance, all the other things that go into a house. The consensus, and I did sort of an analysis of everything out there, seems to be that about 55 to 80% of emissions come during the operational period. So I think that's important to keep in mind. So when we talk about this cement usage, it's only really falling into that smaller material construction phase. And to put a fine point on that, so here's the concrete in a 2,200 square foot home, is about 77 cubic yards or 30.8 metric tons. But the average American, just by being alive, produces 16.5 metric tons a year. So that's so the concrete in a brand new home is roughly the average American's annual CO2 footprint, right? That's 1.87 times. So if that makes any sense, if you switch to green cement, you could cut it down to 9.24 tons of CO2 pollution, which would equate to 7 months of an American lifestyle. So let me just point out that, if you really, every time we have another child in this country, the exponential increase in our CO2 footprint is far larger than that one-time cubic yard impact of that concrete for that new home. So I think it's important because we tend to sometimes villainize, builders and the materials in new home construction, but compared with what we use on a daily basis, it is quite a small percentage. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try to rein it in, but it should be kept in perspective. Now, one of the reasons we chose this product is that there's really not a lot of really what I call green or sustainable laminate type floorings out there. I mean, you can find sustainable floorings like cork, sometimes hardwoods, natural woods, depending on their harvest. Tile is quite sustainable, but a very popular category are these composite laminates. Well, this one I really like because they've really made an effort. So they're using a lot of recycled plastics, and they're not using PVC. And my problem with PVC is that it's sort of one of the sort of lower grade plastics, and it's very hard to recycle PVC. Most places won't take PVC for recycling. So this has got a big chunk of recycled plastics and 80% renewable plant-based material. I assume that's various post-industrial and other materials. So a good product that's starting to deal with our plastic issue. And what we're learning, I want to touch on plastics, is plastics are actually worse than we imagine. So we know we've got this, the Pacific Gyre and these huge areas of ocean plastic and all this unwanted plastic pollution. But it goes much deeper. Part of the issue is that even when we do the right thing and we recycle, we are really only recycling about 17% of plastics globally. So down at the bottom, the worst offenders down at the bottom would be that 15%, which is just stuff that I think gets tossed randomly beside the road and washes down into the ocean. The 50%, the big dark area, is the landfilled, and the 18% is the incinerated. Now, I did some research on incinerating plastics, and what we know now is microplastics are actually quite dangerous. And incineration, there's sort of a mixed bag of research on whether microplastics are destroyed in the incineration process. There was this study down at the bottom in Japan. I think there needs to be more research. I think it does actually give incineration sort of a less of a dirty reputation, because if incineration destroys plastics and breaks down the tiniest microplastic particles, it may actually be far preferable to other modes of getting rid of plastic. So, there are some bacteria that are being worked on that apparently will eat plastics, but I don't know how that hasn't become a commercial thing yet. That is somewhat promising. But again, I think the reason that we need to look at plastics, and the reason I'm bringing them up and sort of taking a deep dive into them, is a study just came out this March, the first one to my knowledge, linking microplastic to human health. So we know our bodies are full of plastics, right? This study actually found that people with heart disease have a 50% higher risk of heart attacks and strokes if they have microplastics coursing through their veins. So that's pretty serious, and that's, I think they're just scratching the surface, because now they've found it in reproductive organs and people's brains and so on. So I think that one of our tasks among our many tasks going forward for the next 10 years is to get microplastics under control, along with all the other challenges facing us. But maybe they will lead us to the same place, and maybe sustainability will converge on some of these issues. This is a site I just wanted to mention called Plastic Bank, where you can quickly log in or give it to your clients if they're interested. If you're trying to talk to a client about why to use products with embedded recycled plastics in them, this might be a place to have them look at how much plastic is in their lives and give them a little bit of awareness. Another product that made our short list is this Uponor Matrix Pulse Control System. So what this is specifically is a system that controls radiant heating systems in your floor. So for a long time, radiant systems have been controlled by very simple control. You either turn it up, you turn it down. What makes this one cool is it's got sensors embedded in various places in the floor, so it can control different zones, and it can give feedback to a smart system. So it not only is it going to result in energy savings, but I also discovered another neat side effect of this. So there's the package. That's what the stuff looks like with the smartphone app and the various controllers and stuff. The cool side effect is that it can provide some heat mitigation. So if you look at, say, most modern homes have large window walls, sun shining in, and sometimes they don't have, shading systems. So that floor is heating up. Now, in the old school radiant floor controls, that floor was either on or off. But during even a winter day, they can overheat. So you combine the passive solar with the radiant heating. What the Uponor's new system is going to do, though, is it's going to detect as the sun is heating that area of the floor, and it's going to turn down the volume of hydronic flow to that region. So it's a smart system that, especially in this age of extreme heat, right, where you don't know when you're going to all of a sudden have a heat wave, and you definitely don't want floors overheating, gives you some extra control. This is a steel framing system for decks. Now, this might sound like you're saying, well, how is this sustainable? Well, first of all, it's light gauge steel, not heavy gauge steel. So it's not, a vast poundage of steel. They are sort of, the hollow light steel type of supports. But I also wanted to find out, like, if you compare this with a treated wood deck and look at durability and longevity, how does it pan out over time in terms of its sustainability story? And what sort of convinced me that we should put this steel framing in our sustainable products is the following. Okay, so I did an analysis of treated wood versus steel framing over 25 years. So what it works out to is if you replace that deck once in 25 years, meaning you replace the wood deck, which I don't know about you, but I've put in quite a few wood decks, and I don't know if any of them, I can't think of any of them that have lasted more than about 15, and most of them were pressure treated or CCA treated. So you end up with a wash, essentially, with the CO2 emissions from the steel versus the CO2 emissions from the pressure treated framing for that deck. Now, what's important to point out, though, is that steel framing is supposed to last 50 years. So essentially, if you go on another 25 years and you replace that treated deck 2 more times, then the steel comes out way ahead because you've already basically paid for those CO2 emissions. So if you are looking long term, the steel is actually going to beat the treated wood in terms of CO2 emissions. If granted, most people may not keep a place that long, but I don't believe we should be looking at the tenure of how long someone lives in a place. We should be looking at the building and its operational CO2 emissions over its entire lifespan. This is another category which is near and dear to my heart, which is it's a responsive ventilation system. Now, a couple of manufacturers have had false starts with these where they've tried to put something like this together and it hasn't quite worked out. This one, I think because they've included Aware, now I'm familiar with the Aware VOC sensors. I think what they've done is combined the smart system with these Aware VOC and particulate sensors. And then they've given this thing the ability to, turn things on and off and to respond, maybe intelligently is too strong a word, but it can monitor and respond to certain situations. So it's definitely sort of been a white space in the market, and it's one that's I'm happy to see it's finally happening. And what it will do is it will deal with some of the indoor air quality problems that we have, like this. So the more they study indoor air quality, the worse it gets. Because especially in older homes, of course, where you have poorer ventilation hasn't been brought up to ASHRAE standards and that sort of thing. But even in brand new homes, and I walk in them all the time, I see essentially really like foolish things done, like recirculating range hood fans, which, you know, research has shown only are about 20% effective at removing particles after they fill up, which is quite quickly, the filters. Also, most people don't use range hoods, so they're not automatic. And there's the problem of backdrafting, where range hoods are overpowered and they blast and they pull you know, combustion fumes from a boiler, et cetera. So all of these are problems. And I think because of COVID, people are a lot more aware now that indoor air quality, you know, matters and is affecting their health, and also are willing to spend more to straighten it out. This is just the advertisement for that air cycler with its, you know, IAQ sensors. So it senses what the quality air and where you need fresh air and provides it. And these were just some things as I was scanning through their literature. I like down at the bottom there, especially Pressure Connect integrates with the kitchen range hood. So it, instead of creating a backdraft, it automatically will turn on, like, you know, open a fan or open a vent and allow fresh air in. So pretty well thought out system. I haven't tried it yet. I've only read about it. Hopefully I'll see it at the show this year and I can give you some more info in the magazine soon. This is, now Barone has the Overture system, which is a nice sort of simple version of that system. It's sort of plug and play. So if you were looking to just try something like this out and you wanted control over some devices that was based on, you know, particle and humidity and that sort of thing, you might want to check out the Barone system too. Theirs is definitely in the same category, although it doesn't have to be built in. And I think it's not as full featured, but it does offer some of those same kind of perks. Now, energy management is another category that you know, we felt was important to include in the issue this year. Schneider Electric is, I think, probably the first in, and they have these smart panels, so they can basically be controlled by, you know, your smartphone, and they give you a whole bunch of feedback about what's going on in the house. I believe you can turn, you know, circuits on and off. You can set different sort of parameters like scenes and that sort of thing, and they've tried to make it quite easy to use too, which I always appreciate. So that doesn't seem too daunting either to installers or builders or to their clients. Now, what's driving a lot of this is, of course, is the EV introduction to homes, right? So electric vehicles are becoming more and more common. Solar, the storage issue is becoming a more common, more mainstream thing, and there is a reason behind that. If you look what's going on around the country, electricity prices are going up. It's not your imagination. So the electricity price rose 6.2% in the country, right, from 2022 to 2023. I know in the state of Maine, they just announced that the price hike overall will go up, I think, $15 per month on average for electricity customers. I mean, that's pretty significant, especially for people on a fixed budget. You know, there's a lot of sort of anxiety about electricity costs, and I think that's driving both the solar and the storage market. And I think it will drive the smart panels as well, as people try to manage their electricity more precisely. And down below that, you see the number of power outages. Now, one thing I will say is weirdly, there were, I think, fewer major power outages in 2023 than there were in 2022, but that might be an anomaly. I know, you know, again, up here in Maine, it's we've had numerous, and the power outages seem to be longer, where, you know, we had one that was 3 or 4 days long, and that's the point when you start looking around going, you know, maybe I should invest in solar storage, because, you know, if you're not having an emergency need for solar storage, it's less of an easy sell, right? Because it's a little bit of a leading edge product, and it's maybe not quite at the need phase. So definitely that is driving some of the market. This company too, I just learned about, called Savant, they also offer a smart panel that's tied into storage and a charging station. And theirs too can be controlled on a smart app on your phone. Seems quite intuitive to use. They were not one of our winners, but I just learned about them. So the advantages of these energy management systems, you can save because they're basically looking at where you use energy and where you waste energy. So you can control it, quite easily. And for example, say you have a solar system and you find out that you only really need 70% of your capacity to charge up your solar battery or your EV each day. The other 30% through the smart panel, can be diverted to a battery backup or some other use to run household things. So again, it gives you the flexibility to kind of move your energy around sort of digitally in kind of a fun way, which I think is cool too. On the commercial scale, this is NV Energy, who's another one of our sponsors. So they do the same kind of energy management. If you have a commercial building, they help commercial entities figure out where their power is going. They hook them up with control systems that they can control digitally to make sure that they're cooling, heating, operating equipment most efficiently. And they work with commercial operators to customize each building to the optimal energy use. Now, of course, we have to talk about appliances because it's a big part of, certainly on clients' minds. It may be one of the top things, and you as a builder or an architect, I'm sure you get asked constantly about which appliance suite and so on. One of the things that comes up quite a bit is when we talk about sustainability is whether efficiency of appliances has peaked, meaning they've just gotten so efficient that there's really no place for them to go. I know this comes up with the low flow toilets, for example, and they keep trying to squeeze another few drops of water out of the toilet, and companies like Niagara, who is one of our winners, has managed to do that. Impressively, some of these appliance makers have also managed to find new ways to save either energy or water or both from devices that we kind of thought, we kind of thought they'd hit the end of the road. So this is, if you look at 1981, I did this analysis to try to get a rough idea of how much the efficiency of different appliances has improved. And you can see, I guess the top one, the one that's improved the most is refrigerators, right? So a lot of them have sort of heat pump systems in them now. I think that's why they've managed to drop their energy needs so much. Next would be dishwashers. I think they include the overall, water, heating, and energy use in there. And also, dishwashers use shorter cycles. Air conditioners probably roll heat pumps in there would probably be even more dramatic than that. I think they only looked at air conditioners. So there, and if you look at the bottom right, the line's starting to flatten out because they're just not making these dramatic gains anymore, or not very often. So when we're weighing the impacts of appliances, I like to start with, what are the big users? So clothes dryers, clothes washers, ovens, dishwashers. So those are the top four right there. So in our choosing our sustainable products, why not start with the really big ticket items? Fortunately, manufacturers have sort of discovered, I'll say, a technology that it's been around for a while. Like, I used to RV, and if you've ever, stayed in an RV or driven an RV, they have these all-in-one washers, and they've been around at least 10, 15 years. I've seen them. But these are new products, and I think what's happened is the heat pump technology has improved a lot. So they've now got much better inverters and variable speed technology and all that. So this is the LG version of the sort of all-in-one washer dryer. Now the thing that's cool about this is, like dryers, for example, it's really hard to improve on the efficiency of a dryer unless you switch into a heat pump. So it's sort of a jump. I'd almost say that's an innovation or it's an innovative use of a technology. Now, I know a few years back, Whirlpool came out with heat pump dryers, and I don't know how they did overall, but I owned one for a while, and they didn't seem to really take off in the marketplace. But I think that has changed with these new all-in-one products. So not only are they going to be, you know, they're front loading, so they're water efficient, they're energy efficient. So this is, again, sort of a game changing. I'd put this almost on the innovation side more than the upgrade side of things, because they're really going to raise the bar on lowering CO2 emissions for both washing and drying clothes, which is one of the big, you know, appliance energy users in the house. And this is a newer Whirlpool version. So similar type of technology, all-in-one washer and dryer. And of course, the GE profile is yet another one. I saw this one demonstrated at the last builder show. It's pretty impressive. It is a little bigger, I think taller, and maybe because it has that extra rack on the bottom. So if you were looking for the compact space saving, I think you can get it without the little drawer on the bottom, so it'd be about the same size as the other one. But it's Energy Star, you know, they say it'll save you up to 60% over, you know, the traditional combo, but I haven't done the follow up on that, but that's what the literature, I believe, says. And the next category of appliance, another big one, is induction cooking. Now, I own an induction cooktop and a slide-in. I love it, and these things have gotten a bad rap, although I think it's starting, the tide has turned. When they first came out, I think, first of all, people didn't know how to use them, and I think some of the technology wasn't quite there, and there were some callbacks and some problems where they were hard to repair, et cetera. From what I did some sort of scouting around to see what the intent or the sentiment is on the internet now. So this is the KitchenAid 4. Let me touch on one other thing first, though. Okay, so I did want to say why induction. Well, along with the fact that fossil fuels are, you know, causing a gigantic heat waves all over the planet, I think that this is sort of one of my favorite topics, is that natural gas infrastructure is falling apart. And all over the country, if you do a search for, you know, home destroyed or home explodes, try that, you will find hundreds of references to home explosions that are, you know, often the local press always says it's under investigation, it's unexplained. Well, you tell me how a house completely explodes into splinters other than a gas explosion. So my feeling is that gas infrastructure is dangerous, and, you know, depending on the age of it and how it was installed and so on, and I wouldn't have it in my house. So that's another good reason to, you know, let's not politicize natural gas. Let's move on from natural gas. We have a great cooking alternative in induction tops, and they really do everything that a natural gas stove does. Like a cooktop, you can simmer, you can heat water rapidly, you can get up to high temperatures rapidly, and it's not throwing off a lot of the noxious fumes that natural gas cooking does into your house. So, okay, this was a Consumer Reports. I wanted to find out how people are feeling about the performance of induction tops. So this is a recent Consumer Reports study. They said 80% feel that of the induction ranges perform well enough for us to recommend them. And on top of that, the gas ranges that they evaluated did not perform well, at least half of them. All but one got their top score. Not a single gas range earned their top score. So, you know, it's easy to politicize things about gas ranges and how we're trying to take away people's gas ranges, but we're not trying to take away, we're trying to give them something better, basically, and safer by switching to induction. Here's another response to the criticism for induction tops. One of the things people have complained about is that the glass surfaces get scraped. So what'll happen is somebody buys an induction top and they pick up an old cast iron pot and put it on there, and while it heats up quickly, it scratches the surface. Well, when I got mine, I immediately switched to these enamel covered cast iron, or you can get them in aluminum, and they work fantastic and not a scratch. I've had it a year and have not scratched the surface at all with cast iron. And it's great to be able to cook in cast iron the same way you would on a gas stove. You know, a lot of us have iron deficiencies anyway, so it's a good way to bring some iron back into your diet too. This is the public sentiment I was talking about. So overall, public sentiment is gone. I think if you'd done this 3 years ago, it probably would have been the other way around. But overall, by scraping the internet, they said the sentiment is quite positive. If you look at comments, people actually are very positive. I think when you get into issues like noise, and people complain about noise, I've also owned those little one burner, the cheap knockoff inductions. Those are noisy, and they do have like they are, if you get them wet, they can break, you know, if you spill water into them, which we all do. So I think we're talking about professional or residential grade induction cooktop ranges, not the little one-off, you know, type you can buy on Amazon. Water management. So, you know, water, obviously it's a big issue, and depending where you live, it's a gigantic issue. Now, gray water recyclers, they've been around for a while, but it's hard for them to get traction, right? Because nobody really wants to use gray. Obviously, you're not going to drink it. They want something that's sort of hands-off, that you don't have to, you know, add chemicals to and so on. Well, we liked this unit because it seems self-contained, low impact, low input from the user. And, you know, they make a good point, which is that, you know, they don't try to make it the be all end all. They say this is going to help you on certain things for, you know, shower water, washing machine water, that you can reuse this. And what it's doing is reducing your overall, you know, water use in the house significantly. So if you look at how we use and how much water costs, you know, what's interesting is if you look at the chart on the right, showers, faucets include more, by the way, than just the water we drink. Most of that water is not what we call potable drinking water, and yet most cities are required to provide water in a potable form. So it's one of the things that's always irked me about the water, the way we use water is 1% of our household water is used for drinking and cooking, and yet we have to condition 100% of it at the level that it could be consumed. So if you think about with a gray water system, we don't have to bring in as much fresh water because we're reusing some of the water we have, right? So another thing I just wanted to point out is that the CO2 emissions from water are significant. They're not huge. I did the math on it. It's about 251 pounds of CO2 per year for the average household. So it's not really, this gray water system is more about, you know, people saving water. It's not really that much about reducing CO2, although every little bit helps. In our doors, walls, and windows category, we picked kind of an offbeat one, which was this power shading system. What I liked about this power shading system is that these are very low energy requirements. They're only 5 watts. So like they point out in this little blurb here, that some of the competitors require 30 watts per shade. So 5 watts is a pretty insignificant amount in terms of, you know, putting these things up and down. I mean, they do come at a little more of a premium cost, I believe, but that actually can be paid off quite quickly. And I actually found a study that looked at shades and how quickly you could pay back shades. So this is where you get your payback from a shading system, 30%. So if you're in a hot climate, it makes sense, right? You're going to have those shades when the sun hits the window, the shade will automatically drop. It's not going to save you as much in a heating climate. It's just going to keep some of the heat in. Maybe at night you drop it down when you go to bed, and if you're in a winter climate, it keeps some of the heat in. But the real savings is keeping that beating sun out and keeping some of the cool conditioned air in. Now, this study from the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy found that these shades had a 4-year, you know, basically it's approximate. They last about 10 to 20 years, and they have a 4-year payback. I think the one's shown maybe a little more than that, depending on the size and the model of it. But you know, that's a pretty significant energy savings. One of the points they make is that certain times, like active smart windows and other like sort of high-end windows are quite expensive, and this is an alternative if you're trying to achieve, for example, a passive house or trying to even a net zero house. Adding these automated shades might be both an affordable and a reasonable way to, you know, recoup some of that energy savings. And that is my rather short presentation this year. I didn't think I needed to go through every one of our 50 winners because it's available in our March-April issue. And I always like the question and answer period anyway, because you may have specific questions about specific products or categories, which I will answer to the best of my ability. If you want to send any questions into Mike, I'm here at your disposal. Thank you, everybody.
Mike, you're muted.
Yep, that's the fun. Okay, so I put something in the chat for people to see that they can send in their questions now. And I've got a couple of questions to kind of kick things off, if you don't mind, Matt.
Sure, go ahead.
Just made some notes as we were going through. So back to the EV slide or two that you had. Do you have data on the EV market uptake? How is that coming along?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have it at my fingertips, but it has slowed, but it is still, you know, on a steady, I'd say a steady gradual rise. I know that many of the manufacturers did a little bit of a pullback this year because they weren't selling at the pace they thought they would be. So it's still certainly, I think with the IRA, federal, you know, IRA money and other forces at work, I think it will still continue to move up and forward. It just may not be as predictable in terms of, you know, how fast and how far it will go. I think again, I think there's the battery issue is getting better. I think that they're solving some of the range issues. I did read yesterday, there's a couple of new vehicles coming out that have a little, you know, they keep extending the range. One of the things I would mention, you know, when researching, I was actually looking at would I buy one, is a lot of the lower priced vehicles only have about like a 250 mile range. So it really depends how you're going to use it. For a lot of people like myself included, I often have to do a 2-hour trip, like every week or two. I have to do a 2-hour trip, round trip, 2 hours there, 2 hours back. So I could just barely make it with one of those lower cost EV, you know, electric vehicles, but I don't think I would risk it. So again, just as a subject of one of choice whether to buy one or not, the range is not quite where I would want it for my particular use. So I think that's going to make a big difference.
And a follow-up to that too, Matt, on the EV truck topic.
Yep.
Maybe I'm mistaken, but it would seem that the demographic for trucks might not be too environmentally focused. So what do you see on or what are you kind of looking forward to or predicting for the EV truck uptake?
Well, the thing is about they sold, I know the Fords pre-sold out like way back when. I don't know what their current, you know, availability is, but the thing about those is they have tremendous torque power. So they actually are workhorse trucks. And, you know, I think people may not realize that, but on the short run, if you're within an hour of your office or whatever, and you're going and you're hauling things back and forth to sites or heavy, you know, concrete blocks or whatever, that truck is actually very suited to that. So it is actually not a princess truck when it comes to, it's just when you get into range. I think the range, if you have a heavy load on it, it does cut the range down. I think it was like 150. It cuts it basically in half, right? So you wouldn't be able to go on the 3-hour excursion with a heavy load, but you could certainly use it the same way you would any heavy truck if you're within the range of your job sites. So it's pretty good, actually pretty good work truck. The other thing that it has is it's essentially a built-in quiet generator because it's got those huge batteries in it. So instead of rolling in and hooking up all your generators, you just plug into the back of the truck, and it will easily run your entire house if you have a system set up, smart panel system and transfer at your house. If you have a power outage, you plug that thing in and you can go for days, running it from your truck battery. So that's a nice perk too, so considering that, even a new gas whole house system is probably 10 grand or more.
That is a nice add-on there.
Yeah.
You mentioned concrete blocks, and I wanted to ask a question on that slide where you were showing the CO2 emissions of various things. It's a nice pie chart, and the bulk of it was concrete. So what I wanted to ask about that particular graphic was if cement and rebar are listed separately, then is that graphic implying that the sand, aggregate, and water has that high of a CO2 footprint?
It's funny you mentioned that. I noticed it as I was showing the chart, and my answer would probably be that the chart, it's probably an error in the chart because concrete is probably, obviously concrete includes the rebar. The rebar may not be, but I think the cement should be rolled into the concrete. The only other thing I could think is when they did the analysis is whether the cement was not used in the foundation, like was it stuff that was used for, other parts of the house, like, countertops or, resurfacing, a slab or something. But my guess is, I wouldn't take this chart as gospel. I would say, we're in the right ballpark with 43, but I just rolled the cement in with that.
Okay, yeah, because I thought, man, there's only 3 other main ingredients there. So
right, because the cement is usually the cement is the big cost, right? Cement's the big because it takes heat to produce cement. It takes incredible amounts of heat, which is part of what makes Portland cement so energy intensive.
Yeah, and the only other theory that I had on that, Matt, was were they trying to attribute the transportation of the material, the delivery of it, and the CO2 emissions associated with the trucks driving back and forth? That's the thing I could think of.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it was just, I don't know, but I don't think that was it. I think it was probably just an oversight. Yep.
Okay. And then certainly want to make a verbal call out for questions from our audience if they have any. I do have another one for you, excuse me, as well. We're talking about the combo washer dryers.
Yeah.
The ones that you showed us are ventless. And so I'll kind of ask that basic question of how exactly does that work? How does it intake and exhaust air?
If you think about it, the air that's being exhausted is not full of, so the humidity is extracted from the air before it's exhausted, right? So it's pulling in fresh ambient air from around it, and then you'll have a plumbed water exit, if that makes sense, like the wastewater. So that humidity is collected, not shot, like, it's not like an old dryer where if you didn't have a dryer hose on it, you'd be shooting humidity into your air. That humidity is condensed into like a pan, flows into and then it's pumped out. So the humidity is never pumped back into your living space. But I'm sure that it does draw ambient air. So you need makeup air has to come from somewhere, right? So this is where, you have something like an air cycler that could help you balance your airflow in that room, especially in the laundry room. Like if you've got a laundry room with closed doors on it, you might want to at least put like a passive vent in the wall. There's some German ones that I've installed before that will equalize the pressure when it pulls air in to make the makeup air for that ventless dryer.
Okay. Matt, we had a question come in from Stephen, kind of really more of an observation.
Yeah.
He's thinking that architects and designers, along with their clients, should be talking about passive solutions to some of these issues, and he talks about specifically the motorized shades. That, you can put permanent exterior shading elements outside. You can use retractable shading that can be controlled manually, as opposed to being plugged in, even though it has the small power requirement. You want to talk a little bit about some of the alternatives?
I think that's a good point. In fact, one of our vision houses that we're building with architect Peter Pfeiffer right now down in Austin, he's very much a believer in passive. He probably hates, anything active because he loves passive stuff. So one of the things he's doing is putting extended overhangs on this house so that, like your guest is asking, couldn't we design the house so that when the sun is high, the roof is essentially shading it. Honestly, the only pushback, not from me, but from I suspect you would get from builders, is not every client will accept that look. In fact, I'd say most won't. So you got to be a somewhat progressive, shall we say, in your willingness to have a more modernistic, not conventional looking house in order to have some of those passive features. If you're willing to have your house look a little different, you certainly can get a lot better performance with the correct overhangs and siding and trees and airflow. You could basically go without, but I think that the things like those automated blinds fill in for the fact that most people have very narrow sense of what they want in a home design.
And I'll add a slight bit of commentary, Matt, if I may, and that is some home designs. I'll speak about my own. It's an atrium ranch, and some of the windows are not easily reachable. So if you want to put up some shades, and we did, because we were getting, we referred to our windows on the rear of our house as a blast furnace because they directly south. It was fading flooring, it was fading furniture, and it was bringing a lot of heat into the home. So we put blinds up, but also from a physical standpoint, we could not reach a couple of the windows to manually, unless we had very, very long cords hanging down. Again, to an aesthetic, some people may not want that. So we went with it's battery operated power blinds to help control the heat that was coming in through the solar heat gain.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good comment. I also think I don't like, I'm sure other people feel the same way. Like, I don't like battery powered devices. However, I think we're very close to integrating sort of almost invisible solar PV into things like our blinds. So they'll provide that little trickle of power and recharge batteries. And hopefully we can reduce our battery footprint quite soon. I think that technology is right around the corner. So that would take care of that issue as well.
And I would be happy to get rid of the battery operated, because it's a pain to try and change out those batteries.
Right.
Like I said before, exactly. It's hard to reach them in the first place. Now I got to get all the way to the top.
Right. Exactly.
But I do like the mention of Peter Pfeiffer. By the way, the media sustainability superhero. So
yes, he was. Yep. Great guy. Very, very talented architect. Yep.
Yes.
Any other queries out there?
No, but that's all the questions we have for today. So I want to wrap it up. But thank you, Matt, for doing this with us and walking us through some of these things. Any final comments from you?
No, thank you. And I realize it's hard to make time in the summer, so appreciate everybody hanging in there with us. And feel free, my email is, I'll leave it up on the end here. So if you had further questions or whatever, feel free, or you want to pitch me a project or a product, email me anytime. I do try to respond to everything unless you're really mean, and I will do so quite promptly, usually within a day or two. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to leave this
in the chat. Also, thank you to our audience for asking some questions, and thank you, obviously, to our sponsors as well, which is Whirlpool, Uponor, and PowerShift by NV Energy for their generous sponsorships. Thank you much. Hey, you know what? We're going to be back in 3 weeks for a Housing 2.0 Thought Leader webinar with Rob Howard of Howard Building Science. That's going to be Wednesday, July 17 at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So please join me for that. Until next time, have a great 4th of July. Just stay safe, stay healthy, and take care, everyone. So long.